You know, we all watch cartoons for that escapist experience. But beyond that, they're also about providing an entertaining education to those that watch. Sometimes, important themes are explored that have a huge influence on people. But some cartoons can, well, abuse this power and funnel their own warped worldview into the minds of others without them even knowing. So with that in mind, today I put together a list of times when cartoons were racist. This is merely done to educate you guys, the audience, and none of these messages conveyed by any cartoon shown today are acceptable, nor were they ever acceptable. Viewer discretion is, of course, advised. With all that said, on with the list. To start us off, we have a duo that everyone watching this video will have seen or at least heard of. Tom and Jerry. Everyone remembers the chaotic slapstick comedy and over-the-top violence with these two. But what people forget is that during its run from 1940 to 1967, Tom and Jerry was rife with racial stereotypes and harmful caricatures of minorities, like in 1943's Yankee Doodle Mouse, where Jerry uses an explosive to blow up a kettle with Tom's head in it, putting Tom in blackface with exaggerated lips. This type of mockery was the norm in America at the time, but we'll talk more about that later. There's also a forgotten character from early Tom and Jerry called Mammy Two Shoes. Now, many of you may know her as the faceless owner of Tom, but in earlier Tom and Jerry, she shockingly had a face. But she wasn't the owner of Tom, and instead was given a servant role as a housemaid. And just like Tom's depiction from earlier, Mammy's caricature-like nature sports the same over-the-top features. It honestly seems that there wasn't a single horrid stereotype left out. The creators must have known their mistake though, as they retired that version of the character in 1952. However, that's not the end of insensitivity in this classic cartoon, as in 1942, in an episode titled Puss in Toots, Tom and Jerry are once again in a brawl when Tom lands on a record player. Jerry plays the next record. It smashes into Tom's head and begins to play, and the record happens to be some stereotypical, Oriental-sounding music, which then transforms Tom into this. Yeah. It seems that the creators of Tom and Jerry were up for mocking any minority. I think there's that many instances down the years of Tom and Jerry episodes getting rewritten, edited, and banned, that this could actually be a video in itself. But for now, on to the next cartoon. Here's another classic we all know, TheFlintstones, a show set around two prehistoric Stone Age families in their humble little town, Bedrock. But the funny will soon fade from the Yabba Dabba duo when you're reminded of this episode titled The Prowler from 1960, where the two families inquire about some judo lessons from Rakimoto Hashimoto. Now, if the name wasn't bad enough, the animation of this character certainly is. Depicted as a much smaller, paler character with exaggerated slanted eyes, couple that with his broken English dialogue and a mocking, poor attempt at a Japanese-like accent, and you have an incredibly offensive character.
Yes, he's very good for families to taking judo lessons.
And a sorry excuse for a parody. Oh, and by the way, in this episode, he's a money-mad con man who tries to swindle both families out of their hard-earned cash. So yeah, not good at all. Really awful stuff. Let's move on. 1953's Peter Pan is a movie we've all seen at some point or another. A film about childhood imagination and the importance of growing up. But when you pull back Peter Pan's curtain of charm, there's a host of seriously problematic themes and depictions explored by the creators. The most notable of which is no doubt its portrayal and descriptions of Native Americans. Characters like Captain Hook call them Redskins, a slur often used towards Native Americans in real life. That insensitivity is only heightened by the unnatural red appearance they've been animated to have. But it sadly doesn't stop there. There's also the song What Makes the Red Man Red, which, horrendously offensive title aside, portrays Native Americans as primitive, savage, and ignorant people, whilst also mocking their traditions and culture.
Know all the things that he knows now, but the Injun he sure learned a lot, and it's all from asking how.
During the song, they're also referred to as Injuns, a mispronunciation of the word Indians, and used as a slur to incorrectly label the original inhabitants of America as American Indians. Since the film's release, the depiction of Native Americans has been universally slammed, even provoking a supervising animator on the film, Mark Davis, to say that if this film was to be made again, he would completely alter the portrayal of Native Americans in Peter Pan. Too little, too late, Mark. The canine classic, which is 1955's Lady and the Tramp, surely couldn't have come under fire for its representations, right? Wrong. As the characters Sai and Am, two Siamese cats, have been widely criticized for their design, voice, and song. The two feline friends appear harmless, but if you take a closer look and listen in, they're littered with lazy stereotypes of Asian people. Their eyes are abnormally slanted for cats, they have buck teeth, and their accent is a painful impression of Eastern Asian origin. The cats speak and sing in broken English throughout their Siamese cat song. The song's melody also reinforces the stereotypes shown, as it's another cliched Oriental piece with stereotypical Asian instruments like gongs to underpin the scene. You know, if the over-the-top character design wasn't enough. Narratively, the cats are also positioned as the antagonists to Lady, causing trouble for her and her owners, and try to frame her as a dangerous dog, further reinforcing the personality stereotypes that Asian people are untrustworthy and cruel. But this isn't the only time animators have used Siamese cats to target minorities. In many people's eyes, The Aristocats is a severely underrated animated movie from the early 70s, with people fawning over talking and singing cats. But within this seemingly cute film is perhaps one of the most outright and blatant racial stereotypes in media that hasn't been edited out in any way. In the song Everybody Wants to Be a Cat, a jazzy swing melody of soul, a cat by the name of Shun Gon is seen during an instrumental break playing an oriental theme on a piano with chopsticks, whilst singing Shanghai, Hong Kong, Egg Foo Young, Fortune Cookie Always Wrong. And to make matters even worse, Shun Gon isn't even credited as that in the original movie. He's credited as Chinese cat, despite being a Siamese cat, which originates from Thailand. All the while being voiced by a white American voice actor who uses an American accent throughout the film, until a word comes up with L's in it, which stereotypically is said to be hard for people with a Chinese accent to pronounce. For instance, at the beginning of the song where he says this.
Oh boy, fellas, let's rock the joint.
This is just about as horrendous and uncreative as you can get, relying entirely on hateful stereotypes for what I can only assume is an awful attempt at humor. Kinda a common theme here. I mean, again, this was made in the 70s too, which was nowhere near perfect in the realm of racial sensitivity, is still post-civil rights movement in America, which you'd think would affect the production team somewhat. But nope. But gear up, as if you thought the 70s were bad then. Well, remember when I said earlier, when we were covering Tom and Jerry, that I'd get back to you on just how rife racial caricatures and parodies were back in early to mid-20th century America? Well, it wasn't some low-grade, independent filmmakers or even the mid-range that were the flag bearers for this type of comedy. The biggest cartoon powerhouse of its time was also guilty, a name we all know, Looney Tunes. Now, just as a precursor to this, Looney Tunes has a long-standing history of censorship and racial undertones in its cartoons. I'll be covering an episode that slipped through the cracks in this section, and straight after, I'll get into the Censored 11. But for now, we go back to 1953 with the episode Southern Fried Rabbit, where Bugs Bunny is up to his old tricks, annoying anyone who crosses his path. And his rival today is Yosemite Sam. But instead of his raucous cowboy persona, in this episode, he's dressed as a Confederate soldier with the sole purpose to stop Bugs crossing the Mason-Dixon line. The only way Bugs is allowed to cross the line is when he returns fully in blackface, wearing rags and with an exaggerated southern accent.
The sun shines bright in my old Kentucky home.
The song you hear Bugs playing here is My Old Kentucky Home, a song which was based on a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is all about the horrors of slavery. It could be a coincidence, of course, but then this happens.
What's this I hear about you whipping slaves?
Yeah, that wasn't a coincidence, was it? The back catalog of banned Looney Tunes episodes sadly gets worse, though, as along with its sister series Merry Melodies, the two were responsible for 11 of the most outrageously offensive cartoons of all time. So much so that in the eyes of Warner Brothers, they do not exist. The cartoons were from 1931 to 1944, but as of 1968, they were pulled from broadcast, with the hope they'd just fade away into obscurity. Here are the titles of those episodes. There's too many to go through one by one, but throughout them all, there is a key theme of showcasing black people as the same comedy character, with inflated lips, a lazy or stupid demeanor, sometimes both, slow talking, slow moving, and of course, at the butt of all the jokes, which are all made by white characters with some form of power over them. Crazily, there were rumors that these episodes were all going to be re-released in 2010. But thankfully, it was all hearsay, and those tone-deaf cartoons continue to never see the light of day. Thank goodness. Disney's 1941 classic Dumbo is all about an adorable baby elephant with ears so big he can fly. Now that sounds like 70 minutes worth of family fun, doesn't it? It'd seem like it, but hidden in plain sight, there are some really problematic references, depictions, and songs. The first of which is When I See an Elephant Fly. Well, the song isn't the problem, but the singers, a group of crows, are, and to be more specific, their leader, Jim Crow, clearly being named after Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation in the US until 1965. Now, whilst in appearance these crows aren't overtly racist, there's no mistaking the naming of them, coupled with the accents, was a purposeful choice. The second song, which raises a red flag, comes in the form of The Song of the Roustabouts, a song performed by faceless black laborers with the lyrics,
We work all day, we work all night, we never learn to read or write. We're old, have gone to bed, we slave until we're almost dead. We're happy.
The almost subliminal nature of the examples shown in Dumbo is almost more sinister than anything we've shown so far, especially when you remember the only real target audience for this cartoon is kids. Seriously, how did any of this fly in any point in time? Do you remember a little while ago I mentioned a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin? The heartbreaking retelling of the hardships and torture of being a captive slave. Well, in 1933, the most famous cartoon character of all time, Mickey Mouse, spoofed that novel. In Mickey's Melodrama, Mickey and his friends decide to put on a show for a crowd in a barn. The show, of course, was heavily based on Uncle Tom's Cabin, and required Mickey to play two characters, Uncle Tom and Topsy. To get into character, Mickey uses a stick of dynamite to put himself in blackface, whilst wearing rags and a wig. Even if you feel a bit desensitized by the stuff we've spoken about so far, that's enough to turn anyone's stomach. But sadly, when it comes to Mickey Mouse, there's another episode that may be worse, Mickey's Man Friday. The short was released in 1935, and starts with Mickey getting lost, stranded on a tropical island where he meets, well, there's no real nice way to say this, but according to the short, he meets a monkey-faced native. Yeah, horrific. But it doesn't end there. The native is depicted to be stupid, slow-talking, and enthralled by the white Mickey. His appearance doesn't get any better, a disgusting caricature of what's meant to resemble a black person. Mickey quickly names the native Friday, and learns that his brothers, a tribe of natives, plan to eat him and Friday. That's right, so they're being depicted as savage cannibals too. What happened to the slapstick comedy, the charming fun? Even back in the 30s, did we really have to rely on scraping the bottom of the comedic barrel? The worst part is, there were more than one of these types of shorts for most cartoons around. Like, Popeye the Sailor Man is perhaps a forgotten relic of a bygone generation. Kids these days may know him for eating spinach, or being played by Robin Williams in a live-action remake, and you know, it's probably best it stays that way. As in 1952, an episode of Popeye was released titled Popeye's Pappy, and saw the titular sailor man traveling to a tropical island in search of his father, Poop Deck Pappy. On arrival, Popeye is met by a wild tribe of humans, and that's where things take a nosedive, as each islander is an exaggerated caricature of a black person, just like we saw earlier. However, the animators and artists took an extra step to make sure their depictions were as vile as possible. For these caricatures, they've added things like bones through their hair, rings through their nose, and the language they speak is gibberish. According to popular opinion, it's said the reason for this was to directly mock African languages.
Oogla boogla schmoogla! Save 'em, King Pappy!
But if you can believe me, it doesn't end there. Popeye soon discovers that his father, the only white man on the island, is king. Not to mention this tribe are depicted as savage cannibals, wanting to eat Popeye but soon toe the line for their king. What's crazy about this episode is that it's a remake of 1938's Goonland, where the islanders Popeye was facing were an original set of animal or humanoid creatures known as goons. But when the episode was due to be colorized, they swapped out the goons in favor of the offensive islanders, which really is mind-boggling. You'd think they'd have made this mistake in 38 and changed it in 52, not the other way around. They had the chance to not be racist, and they decided to be horrible people anyways. Very disappointing. The world of animation should be a place of inclusion, with basically anything you could ever dream up being able to take form on the cartoon canvas. These examples of bigotry serve as a stark reminder of just how not to use that canvas, as it's nothing but inexcusable, hateful behavior for the sake of mocking others for their differences. It's immature and should be rightfully left in the past.